of my accident, my ankles will roll, and if I have to stand for a very long time, I'd rather sit. And I'm getting out my notes here, so I'm, you know, Becky, in Sunday school, Becky had a timer so she wouldn't go too late. I don't know if she gave that timer to Pastor Kevin or not to shut me off. It's going on 20 years now since my accident. And, you know, before that, I wasn't really a serious Christian. Everything was going good, and well, God had another plan. And it was a dumb farm accident, you know. But, you know, going to church with Kay and listen to pastors about their faith. But I can say I truly got my faith from Kay. She lived her faith. And we get our faith by hearing. And, you know, after that accident, we were so blessed. Our community came to finish seeding our crops. They worked the cattle, put the cattle out to pasture, sprayed the crops, put up hay, and I was able to combine my soybeans. And when I was on that tractor, I was pinned 5 hours. And as most of you know, I was looking at my watch every 5 minutes. I had a little notebook. I was writing my goodbyes to my family. And, you know, it started at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Truck wouldn't start, you know, but I was writing my goodbyes, and at about 2:30, I dropped my pencil. So I lost all contact with the world, and I did have a Leatherman knife. I considered what to do with it. But I looked at my legs, and the pain was just unbearable. But I looked at them, and my legs were not broke. I'm not bleeding to death. And at that moment, I got pretty bold with God. I said, God, you're not through with me yet. I am going to make it. I'll just wait for Kay. And this is at 2:30, and she didn't get there till 6 o'clock. But I prayed to God. I said, thy will be done. And folks, you cannot believe the amount of peace that came over me. Like I said, I had been looking at my watch every 5 minutes. I didn't look at my watch till 5 o'clock. And then I looked at my watch, and I took my Leatherman and I scratched 5 o'clock into the hood of the tractor. And, you know, she didn't get there till 6, but be in that presence with the Lord. it just took over. And, you know, throughout the hospital stay, this is just a formality. I'm going to make it. And, you know, when I was pinned there, I lost all control of my ankles. I had toe drop. So I did have to learn how to walk all over again. And I was in the hospital for 39 days and then 2 weeks in rehab. When, on the second day of I was in rehab, in intensive care, 5 days. And on the second day, Sherman Silling and Jackie came, and I had tubes in my mouth. I couldn't speak, but I tried to scribble on a piece of paper, "Pray for me." And on the 8th day, our doctor, he was gonna, when they, on a crush injury, they have to open your wounds. So I have over 7 feet of stitches on my legs because they open them up. So the swelling. And our doctor, he said, on day 8, we'll take you into surgery the next day. And he told me, but he didn't tell Kay. Kay got there that night at the hospital, and she said, "What's the procedure?" To the nurse. What happens? Well, the doctor tells the patient or a significant other what's going to happen. And Kay said, "Well, I'm a significant other, and I was not told." So they prepped me for the operation, and the next morning, Kay calls down to the doctor, and you want to talk to her. She said, "There's not going to be an operation." And the doctor said, "No, I'm busy in an operation, so you just come down. I'll meet you halfway." "No, you come upstairs." He came up. He sat down in the stool right next to me, looking at me. Kay and my daughter are sitting beside the bed. He doesn't look at her. He tells me what's going to happen. And when he gets done talking, Kay says, "There's no operation today," because she had talked to her brother-in-law, who's a doctor, and he said, "Let the swelling go down. It doesn't have to be sewed up." He wanted to sew me up and take a hide off my backside for skin. And, this next doctor, we get to change the doctors, and the next doctor comes in, and he said, first you have to have a shower, and then you put this cadaver skin on your, sterile pads on yours to keep it sterile, because the worst place you can be is in a hospital with open wounds, but that's the only place you can be. And he said, "Have you been in a shower yet? The first thing you have to take a shower." And I said, "I haven't been out of bed for 8 days." And so the next day we go, 3 nurses come down, take me down to the shower, and we get me into the shower, and they said, "Can you get over to the shower stool?" And I said, "Sure, I can get right over there, And I get over there, and they put my feet down to the floor. I faint like a rock. She picks me up, puts me on a chair, and I'm babbling away, and she knew it was just 3 more nurses came too also, but she knew it was just a faint. It wasn't anything critical. And I said, "Are we done yet?" And she said, "No, you fainted." And my exact words were, "Well, I've never been in a shower with 3 women before." So next day, the nurse said on our board in the room, "May this day be not so uneventful." Okay. And back to the 5th day of the intensive care. That's the day I got out of intensive care. Our daughter Karen, her girlfriend and classmate, Jessie Black. This is in May now. This is May 3rd, May 4th, whatever. And Jessie Black's going to get married in October. And I looked at her and I said, "I'm going to dance at your wedding." Well, that had to be God inspired, because I would not have known that. So, like I say, I was just overwhelmed by that presence of God on the tractor. And when I got out of the hospital, I started giving testimony, and never on a month of Sundays would I do public speaking. You know, that wasn't for me. That's for pastors, you know. But I started giving testimonies, and Kay had kept notes. You know, she's a teacher. She kept notes with Carrying Bridge, and through my testimonies, we decided we're going to write a book for our family. And we wrote the book and updated it, and just worked on it. And then we decided, well, let's get this out to public. So that's why we went ahead and published this book. And we just wanted to show our faith and show our faith to others. One thing, 2 years after the accident, I climbed a 40-foot tall climbing wall in Minneapolis. So I was very blessed. I want to read something. You know, we talk about why did this happen, and you know, the struggles in our life. And if I can, I'm going to read this. It's the struggles that make us strong. And this author is unknown. A man found a cocoon of a butterfly one day on a small opening. He sat down and watched the butterfly for several hours as it struggled to force his body through the little hole. Then it seemed to stop making any progress. It appeared as if he had gotten as far as he could, and it could go no further. And he was remaining in the cocoon. Now, then the man decided to help the butterfly. He took a pair of scissors and snipped off the remaining bit of the cocoon. The butterfly then emerged easily, but it had a swelled body and a small shriveled wings. The man continued to watch the butterfly because he expected that any moment the wings would enlarge and expand and be able to support his body, which would contact in time Neither happened. In fact, the butterfly spent the rest of his life crawling around with a swollen body and a shriveled wings, and it was never able to fly. What the man in his kindness and haste did not understand that the restricting of the cocoon and the struggle required for the butterfly to get through the tiny opening were God's way of forcing fluid from the body into the wings so that it would be ready for flight once it achieved its freedom from the cocoon. Sometimes struggles are exactly what we need in our life. If God allowed us to go through life without any obstacles, it would cripple us. We would not be as strong as what we could have been. We could even fly. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Appreciate your word. No. God bless you. Thank you for your testimony. And my purpose in having, them share their testimony is that, we can learn from the Word of God and the examples in the Bible, but also, from others that are living it out. And sometimes we think, I could never, make it through whatever these circumstances or trials or tribulations. But, the purpose of these testimonies, is to encourage you today. And I was even going to share about the caterpillar and the struggle that it takes for them. And so I'll just kind of, because of time, we're going to kind of jump through some of this stuff quickly. But last week we talked about keeping our faith when it's tested by outside, secular influences and false teachings. And today I want to focus on keeping our faith when suffering and afflictions come as a result of our trials and tribulations. Like his story pointed out, caterpillars don't turn into a butterfly without the struggle of getting out of the cocoon. I was also going to tell you about how pearls are made only through the oyster fighting off the parasite that's entered their shell. Something good will come on the other side of your trial, or if you would just persevere. And it's easy to say for a guy standing up at a pulpit to just say, persevere through your trial, right? But it's true, and in the moment you may not understand why am I struggling? Why am I going through this? But once we've made it through and we can see that God has a purpose and a plan for us and for those times in our life. God doesn't create, I wish he would, but when God creates us, he doesn't say, poof, you are, the perfect Christian believer that tells everybody about Jesus so eloquently, and your life is, this great leader or administrator or whatever God has called you to be in your life. Our life is shaped through the struggles and circumstances of, living, right? And so today, I want to help you to realize that there's a purpose to the pain and suffering through the trials and tribulations, that when we persevere, we develop character and hope. Romans 5:3 tells us that, meaning that we learn that we can survive it. The next time we go through something, we will have confidence and we will have wisdom to know how to persevere. The first time, you may think, man, where is God? What's going on? Why am I going through this? But through your perseverance, you understand, man, God is with me through this time. And you take that wisdom with you the next time. When we persevere, we will mature in our faith and relationship with God. James 1, verse 2. Perseverance is like a refiner's fire, and it burns away the sin. It burns away the habits, the addictions, the impurities, and it purifies our heart, our soul, and our mind. 1 Peter 1:6 tells us about that. That when we persevere through trials and tribulations and testing, we come out of them worth more value than any pearl and more vibrant and beautiful than any butterfly. If God cares so much about those two things to show such a great illustration and lesson for us, imagine when we persevere through our situations, how good we come out on the end. God doesn't, I kind of said this a moment ago, that God doesn't just create us with all of this experience and wisdom and knowledge, but we learn and we develop through hard work and perseverance. We can take a look at amazing leaders in the Bible, and we can think, man, I want to be like that guy or girl. But do we know how they got to the point where they're at? Joseph was sold by his brothers into slavery. He was falsely imprisoned for many years. Why did God allow that? Well, it brought him to a place of leadership under Pharaoh to lead the people during an intense famine. David's life was a roller coaster. As a kid, he defeats a giant in this powerful statement of faith. He was appointed as king of Israel, but then his life was threatened by Saul. And then he survives that, and then he succumbs to temptation, and he committed adultery. He intentionally had the woman's husband killed. The consequences of these sins were severe, the death of his first child. But we would see at after all of this, he sincerely repents and he's restored. And we have much of the Psalms that are written out of the wisdom and purpose that he gained from those struggles. Jeremiah was persecuted for his faith, but he continued to preach and he continued to prophesy. Moses was a reluctant leader, facing plagues and Pharaoh's army chasing them and very stubborn people that he was leading. Moses had all sorts of struggles that would have made any leader want to give up, but he persevered and God was with him. Ruth's story begins with tragedy and several misfortunes, leaving her a widow and an outsider in her community, but she would persevere and her life would be redeemed. And she would give birth to a son in the line of David, which would famously be the line of family that Jesus would be born into. And Job, we could talk about Job for a whole series of messages, and I'm going to get into his life in just a moment. But each of these tremendous people of faith have powerful examples that we can see and we can learn from. But I doubt very much that we would be reading anything about them if they had not persevered through these struggles and through these times. If they would have just folded at the first sign of trouble, their life's outcome would not be the same. A famous quote by John A. Shedd goes, "A ship in its harbor is safe, but that's not what a ship is built for." My dad was in the Navy, and he had I grew up with that quote on this big picture of a ship way off into the ocean. If that ship would just sit in the harbor, it would never be destroyed. The navy on them would never be hurt, but it would never achieve the purpose for which it was built, right? If you aspire to do nothing in life, then these tribulations you may be able to avoid. But the moment you step out is the moment that adversity comes in, and you will have the opportunity to persevere. That's a quote from me. I didn't want to make a slide and brag about it, but you can make a picture and put it up there if you want. You want me to read it again? Just kidding. Okay, so the story of Job, I want to give a quick summary, and I want to focus on the end result. A lot of times we think, I want to talk about how Job persevered. What was his mindset through all of this? James 5, so this is, James was a brother of Jesus that wrote this letter, 30 years after Jesus' death, thousands of years after Job's life. But James wrote, "Brothers and sisters, as an example of patience," or perseverance could be the word there, or endurance. Your Bible may have any of those words. "As an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy." Job's story is the epitome of a person who persevered through trials and came out on top. At the beginning of the book of Job, if you want to turn there, I'm not going to go slow enough for you to keep up, but I'll point out some of the scriptures. It's a hard book to read. The first chapter and the last chapter are good. In between might get a little bit long, but kind of understanding what Job is going through. The book opens with a scene in heaven where Satan stands before God. God asks him, "What have you been doing?" And he said, I've been roaming the earth. Excuse me. "I've been roaming the earth." And God asked Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" And in verse 8, Satan immediately accuses Job. Well, he only serves you because he doesn't fear you. You've given him, you've prospered him. If you strike everything he has, he will surely curse you to your face. And God knows the righteousness of Job, and he grants permission, limited permission, for Satan to put Job to this test. Why do the righteous suffer? This is the question raised after Job. He loses everything, his family, his wealth. He was a very wealthy man. You can read his statistics. He loses his health. Satan comes back and says, well, he's only righteous because you haven't harmed him. So God allows Satan to harm him, just not take his life. Job has 3 supposedly really good friends that are trying to comfort him and to discuss his crushing series of tragedies. They insist that his suffering is punishment for sin. But that chapter says that Job lived his life without sin to that point. He was found righteous in the sight of God. So Job is going back and forth with them. That's much of the book. You'll read their conversation with him, Job's response, and it goes to the second friend and the third friend, and so there's a lot of conversation there. But Job remains devoted to God through all of this. And he contends that his life has not been one of sin. His wife even tells him to give up, to curse God and die. But in response to all of these friends and to his wife, the thought that life was over for Job, in chapter 13, verse 15, probably one of his famous lines and verses, Job utters, "Though he slay me, yet I will trust him." Job's faith is so strong that even if God's plan results in his death, Job will continue to trust in God. Job, another time, says, "He knows the way that I take." Job is speaking of God in 23, verse 10, that God knows the way that I take, and when he has tried me, I will come out as gold. Like in Peter refers to the refiner's fire. A fourth person, Elihu, tells Job that he needs to humble himself and submit to God's use of trials to purify his life. And so finally, towards the end of the book, Job questions God himself, and he learns valuable lessons about the sovereignty of God and his need to totally trust in the Lord. And Job is restored. He's restored to health. He's restored to happiness and the prosperity. He gets double everything that he had before, one of the wealthiest people in that time period, and he's restored twice as much. The common theme through each of these biblical Hall of Fame people, we would say, is perseverance through adversity. As believers in God and followers of Christ, we can be sure of many things that God has promised and that blessings will come, especially eternity in heaven that we'll spend with him. But one we can also be certain of is that we will all experience trials and tribulations, afflictions and suffering coming into our life. It comes in many ways. Affliction can be a direct consequence of sin. We can't sin and expect God to protect us from the consequences of sin. It could be a judgment from God. Affliction can purify us and help us to develop endurance. It can occur for God's divine purposes. It's a part of living in a fallen world. It can be the result of persecution for Jesus' sake. There's people being killed for their faith right now. It can be the result of a direct attack from Satan. Worship team, if you'll come. Kind of had the purpose of spending some extra time with the Lord in prayer. I want to insert a story here, not in my notes, so it'll go quick, okay? I promise. But in Daniel chapter 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are told by King Nebuchadnezzar and all the people in the country of Israel that you will bow down and worship this golden image. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, no, I won't. Okay? And one of their famous quotes, I had it highlighted here. They tell King Nebuchadnezzar that we do not need to give you an answer concerning this matter, whether or not we will bow down and worship your image when the trumpets and the time comes, is what Nebuchadnezzar had told them to do. What they say is, if it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand. If you punish us for not worshiping you, our God will deliver us from it. They had confidence in the Lord. But this is the most important part. They said, even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. They were strong in their faith and willing to go through whatever would happen to them. Will tests come? Yes. Will trials come? Yes. Will tribulations come? Yes. Will persecution come? Yes. Will trouble come? Yes. But will we be defeated? No. Will we overcome? Yes. Will we be stronger? Yes. Will our faith be bigger? Yes. If we will just persevere and not give up. At the moment a problem or a circumstance pops up in our life, if we will have the faith to say, I'm going to keep going. We're going to make it through this. Man, God is so faithful. Would you stand with me today? We've looked the past couple weeks and today at keeping our faith through circumstances of trials and tribulations. And what I kind of want to end with in the next, want to kind of spend 5 or 10 minutes in closing. I just want to encourage all of you, if you want to come forward and pray, you want to pray where you're at, but I'd love it if we spent some time in the front praying and with the Lord, that we need to decide in our heart today that we're going to serve the Lord. And if you're going through, maybe you're in a situation like this, or like what we've talked about in the past couple weeks, and it's hard to make a decision that I'm going to follow the Lord, but man, you're here today in the service, right? That means you're relying on God a little bit. Maybe you come here with that glimmer of hope, and we want to use this moment just to encourage you, to pray alongside of you, to help you, that this would be a solidifying moment that I'm going to serve the Lord. I'm going to keep my faith in Him. I can't promise you that when you surrender your life to Him, that He's going to make everything smooth and easy and work it all out. But you will take from this experience the faith that God is with you through it, that He will help you as you persevere and as you keep your faith. He will help you through that. So I want to encourage you all to spend time with the Lord as we end the service this morning. Heavenly Father God, we love you, Lord Jesus. We thank you for these testimonies we'd heard from George and Mark and what we've read from your word, that in spite of what's going to happen at some point or another in our faith walk with you, God, you are always with us. You help us to persevere. You help us to keep going. You give us the strength, the wisdom, the direction and guidance, Lord. So I just pray today, God, as we spend extra time in your presence today, Lord, that you would help us, speak to us as we bring our needs to you, as we give our time to you, as we submit to you. Maybe we've never asked you to be Lord of our life, but today we're turning our life to you, God. Would you help us, Lord? Help us, God. As the worship team leads us in a song, I encourage you, would you come forward and find a place to pray and just spend a few moments before we dismiss today.
What can I say?